My name is Jen Carney. I am the Director of Support and Strategic Planning. That is a new title for my role. We've had some shift in our division. We are the Division of System Transformation, my colleagues and I, under Kelvin Roldan, Deputy Commissioner of that division. And this is my colleague, Director Kristen Danusis.
Sure, so Jen and my offices work in tandem. Our office is school and district improvement, so we always say Jen's team helps districts plan and my team helps districts do and act on those plans. But I brought with me Drew Milligan, who is on my team as well as a transformation specialist. He's gonna be capturing a lot of your questions because I assure you we are gonna have to get back to you on a lot of these answers. We have done sort of the best we can at this point to unpack the legislation and really try to spell out again what those differences are in responsibilities. We'll also go through how we have supported school administrators and to some degree district administrators with this work and kind of what our next steps are. But at any time, if you have questions, please feel free to chime in and we'll jot them down if we don't have an answer for you.
So basically today we will give you an overview of the Education Accountability Act, primarily focusing on the site-based management. It does include some other pieces of legislation within that, within this act, but this will be our primary, our point for today. We'll also share with you the support and the resources that we are currently creating and those that we have already delivered for site-based management in particular. Sharing our next steps, certainly with any feedback or any questions that you have. And we will go from there. Feel free to stop us at any time, ask any questions. This will be your time, really an informational session for you. So here's a copy of the legislation. What we are required within this legislation is to create a minimum of a 3-year, but up to a 5-year strategic plan for every LEA. It was a statewide strategic planning process that we've engaged in. We have also the plans underneath. Those plans are included. The annual RICAS or SAT improvement plan is required by law. Currently, all LEAs are required to create this plan for next year at a minimum. No one yet has reached the proficiency benchmark, so that will be one of the required plans by law. The annual improvement plan, so if you think about, if you're familiar with the turnaround action plan that we wrote with Providence, there's year 1, year 2, and year 3, and so those steps and interventions and initiatives are planned in coordination that way for over 3 years. And then we're also required to create a monitoring system. So that is in process. My department is leading that work. I currently also, just so you know, at RIDE, Title I and Title IV have shifted underneath my Office of Strategic Planning. We're looking to look at planning in a holistic way so that we're taking into account all of our resources, our investments, looking at implementation, cost-benefit analysis over long-term goals longitudinally. And so we're trying to make good decisions and give that kind of support and lean in there as well. But all of these required plans now are now going to be part of the district and the LEA planning, but also the school planning. So the school and the school improvement teams, as we discussed, have to have their own plans as required by law. So here's an overview. We know that it does establish a process for the frameworks. And the shifts that we're going to talk about, those governance shifts in hiring, I know that that's probably a hot button for school committee members thinking of the hiring decisions, of some of the budgeting decisions. We will talk about all of the collective bargaining agreements at the LEA and where the legislation will step back from local policy or local collective bargaining agreements. So we will get into that. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. We'll address those. Overall, principal does have more authority now, and with that, Kristen's team and my team have responded largely to the field, which is what we're going to share with you today. How do we prepare our principals, whether they're veteran principals or new principals, to do this work? How do we meet them where they're at? So those are the conversations that we are having. And also for the school planning reviews, and it also requires quite a bit of data that we have collected maybe either federally or at the state level, but in different ways. Also lists of data that, that we're bringing to our legal team. Who owns this, who oversees this? And so if you have any questions on that as we come up, Drew, as we said, will take any questions. There are still things in process and through legal review. So prior to 2019, so there was school improvement teams that were required by law. However, now they are required to have a specific makeup, right? So there's certain stakeholders that now by law need to be present at the school community teams and representative of the community. At the secondary level, that does include students. So those school improvement team members will be appointed to the school committee, school improvement team, which will then go to the superintendent and the school committee for final approval. Should you feel that the school improvement team does not represent the community, then that's your opportunity to have a conversation with the superintendent and the principal and to look further for more stakeholders. So principals now, prior to 2019, there were no explicit duties mentioned. We just, talk about moving principals over the past few years from building managers to instructional leaders, right? There's a lot of talk there, but now there are really specific duties that they have. They will oversee their facilities and their equipment, preparing school budgets, and I want to note here the recommending of the hiring and termination of personnel. Of course, evaluating personnel, and then developing your school improvement plan. Superintendents, I'll give you one. This is a lot of text, so I'm not going to read them all. I'll just let you take a moment. So we can see some of the big points here. Our superintendents are now appointing principals. Superintendents have more say in the hiring of staff and the termination of staff. Legislation requirements. So this is what the SITs must include. Principal, an appropriately balanced number of teachers, educational support, students, parent, guardians, business. And of course, to say that we would expect that all of our stakeholders are representative at the, with diversity across with an equity lens to make sure that all voices are heard and represented at each school.
And I think one thing I would just add here in regards to the formation of the school improvement teams, this is an area where we have already started to think about supporting the field and how to build out that type of school improvement team that truly is diverse and representative of the stakeholders within each school. I know a lot of our school leaders have been reaching out to one another to see how they have really tried to beef up those members on there, but I think this is sort of like that first pain point where we're seeing differences in the legislation that are being played out in the school that where our school administrators are looking for additional support.
Okay, so site-based management. All right, so as you had stated, the purpose of site-based management and the theory of action is that those closest to the schools will have buy-in, a true understanding of data and needs, and also be able to know what the students need to be able to make those decisions. So that is the theory of action. So thinking about, and before I came to RIDE, I was in central office, and before central office, I was a coach, and before that I was in the classroom. So being at every level, knowing that that buy-in is critical, and also knowing from a central office perspective, how important it is to have principals own initiatives and own data to be able to get those best practices through that school door and to actually make it happen. So here we have, I'll let you take this visual in. We have our school improvement teams, principal, superintendent, school committee. At each one of these visuals, there's a dotted box around the person where it finally lands, but you'll see that the arrows move from principal, superintendent to school committee to give recommendations and feedback, and then back to the superintendent. Budget planning. The budget planning, again, moves back to school committee. The recommendations from the school improvement team. We've had a lot of requests for support for principals, from principals around budget planning. We'll talk a little bit more about what that might look like.
And I think just highlighting the interactive nature between the school improvement team and principal before those recommendations are moved to the superintendent and school committee. level, knowing that, again, this is an opportunity for schools to really define what they need in a budget and what their teachers and staff need in a budget, knowing that that all obviously operates underneath the district's budget.
And here's hiring. So the recommendations are made to the school committee and land with the superintendent. But this is where I want to go to the next slide. I think I have this. So here's some of the points that I want to focus on now. It is a recommendation to the superintendent. Termination starts at the principal. That does not involve the school improvement team. The termination would be something under evaluation that the principal would handle on their own and work with the superintendent on. The school improvement team weighs in on the hiring. So let's say you're looking at, the school improvement team is looking at data, and they know that they have some Title I funds, they might have some other local funds, and they're saying, gosh, we really could use a math specialist. Right? So that might be the sort of recommendation that the school improvement team might make to the principal. How can we get a math specialist here? What funding do we have for that? Those are the types of recommendations that they would make.
And I think specifically tied to the school improvement team goals that emerge throughout that process as well.
Right. Oh, so again, yeah, the collective bargaining agreements will always supersede the legislation around hiring and termination. Okay, our next steps. So we have started, we've partnered with RIAS on August, their August conference. Myself, Drew, and another colleague of ours went in and gave basically this presentation, an overview of the Education Accountability Act. And we had almost 40 school leaders sign up for that. As we started to work through, we're talking about differentiation, we're talking about meeting them where they're at. That first meeting, we had them self-assess and go into 3 different groups. One was, I'm a brand new leader, I don't have a school improvement team. The next group was, I have a school improvement team, but it might not meet the letter of the law, or I need some more support getting there. And the third was, I have a school improvement team, we're ready to go. Everything's up to 2019. And we were waiting to see how it shook out, and how we're going to move forward and support. And I'll say that those 3 groups are pretty even. And so our goal is to check back in, working with our partners, where are we now? So we want those leaders that were in group 1 to at least be in group 2, hopefully in group 3, and to continue making progress. We know that not everyone started this year with a fully intact school improvement team, and that our message has been, that's okay, but we have to get you there, so let us know what you need. And principals have certainly responded. We have almost 90 principals now that have registered for a series that Kristen's going to share with you, looking for support in a lot of these topics. So our training modules, we do have, how many of you are familiar with the fact of the school improvement team modules that were released? Okay, I'm going to show you those in a minute. We did put together school improvement team modules. They're basically the same content, but you'll see 2 different paths. One is for the school leader on how to bring together a school improvement team, what the law says, and why it's important, that theory of action. And the other audience is largely the community and the potential school improvement team members. So those we have shared out. They're on the RIDE website. They're in several places online. But I would like to continue to advertise these modules. They are very helpful, and they're great for a train-the-trainer or bringing groups together to give you support, to give principals support, and how to bring the team together, what their roles and responsibilities are.
And I just want to add, they were made with an external partner who really helped the team think about what are all of those steps that are needed to really put together a comprehensive school improvement team and think about this work in a manner that would allow teams to sort of go through the content on their own pace, knowing just how crazy everyone's schedule and times were. So they're really comprehensive modules and resources, and we've gotten some good feedback on them, but would always, welcome additional feedback. We're trying to continue to make resources that are actually valuable to those that are using them.
And lastly is the strategic planning system. So this is very exciting. We are creating a strategic planning system that is going to house not only the strategic plan, And all of those plans required by law is going to be tied to all of the data that RIDE has, all of the accountability data, the assessment data, survey works. We're working on year 2 or even a later iteration of bringing in local data. So when we use a STAR, iReady, or any other qualitative data that you might have, let's say from observations or walkthroughs and so forth. And it's also tied to budget. So we are building this system. Right now we have 10 LEAs that are going to be using it in the beta year. And come spring, it will be available for the school improvement plans. So we will be sharing that back out with principals and with district leaders. And what does it look like now to get the school plan in there? Our goal is to tie the school plan to the LEA to the state. So we have some vertical articulation. We can query down to the school and say, hey, how many schools have the same priority as RIDE, have the same measurable goal, have maybe the same initiative, so that we can say, hey, there's 50 schools that are taking on this initiative. How can we support them, or how can we invest in our resources? And also to look across the state so that we can find schools and districts to come together and to facilitate some communities of practice around common initiatives or some common funding sources.
The one thing that we are in the process of doing as well is with our legal team. I know Jen mentioned it earlier, but we're looking at draft guidance that can go out that talks about when each plan is due, who is it due to, and how will it be submitted, just to make sure we're all on the same page that there's a lot of plans in this Education Accountability Act that are due to RIDE, and we want to try to make that as pain-free as possible. So the strategic planning system that Jen spoke of, it has really been our investment to make that happen. In its ideal state, which hopefully will happen not this coming year, but the year after that, the district strategic plan would be uploaded into the system as with the school plan, and it's as easy as just checking different initiatives and say, these are my 3 initiatives that we're using that are going to feed into our RIDE-CAP success plan or our SAT success plan, so that if everything is in one spot, there's the ability to link budget items to different initiatives within the plan so that you can see, okay, I have these 3 initiatives, this is how much we've invested in it, are we getting like our bang for our buck with how we're investing our resources. We've gotten tons of feedback from the field already, and as Jen mentioned, are having 10 districts that will really begin getting in there and entering in information, being able to see what reports it produces. So this really lays out how we are thinking about aligning all of the elements within the Education Accountability Act specific to the plans for districts and then down to the school level. So as Jen mentioned, we have created our own strategic plan that has been is in the process of being put into that statewide strategic planning system that will then connect with the LEA strategic plans that are required by the legislation as well, that will then connect to the school improvement team plans. And we have linked in this slide deck, and we'll share it out with all of you. There's a sample template that we have given to school leaders that we anticipate will be similar to the types of information they'll have to upload into the system. It is not a requirement from RIDE that this template be used this year, but we're asking principals to try it out before we do build the system. We want to make sure that what we're asking for in the plans meet both their needs and our needs. So the template has been disseminated to anyone who is participating in our professional development series. It's on the RIDE website. We're really looking for feedback on it before it gets built into the system. So to reiterate, it's not a requirement this year, but it will be a requirement that schools submit their school improvement plans this summer to RIDE, and the format is negotiable for this year, but the following year it will be as part of that system.
I would say that, so Drew was part of the adaptation. Drew oversees the CSI schools. He started with the CSI school template, and it's like a lighter version of that. Some of the ESSA requirements by law for schools of comprehensive support and improvement they're all in that ESSA plan, but the good practice, that worksheet, that root cause analysis, a step-by-step process of a good school improvement plan is what we kept and maintained.
And I think one of from a perspective of a principal who has written numerous school improvement plans, one of the big shifts that we're really asking folks to do is think about not just what their data says, but really the why behind that data. What is that cause that is contributing to those data points that are leading your school improvement goals, and then really making sure that those goals are measurable so you can see whether or not you're getting the impact that your desired impact, and also that your interventions are clear, they're solid, they're based on research. They're all the best practices that I think when we started looking at school improvement plans throughout the state, there was such a variation amongst the level of detail and actual ability to measure progress that I think this is hopefully a combined version of the best that we saw out there to be able to truly measure school progress. This is the professional development series that we talked about. The left block is the summer session that Jennifer and team ran. Then from there, we've asked schools to assemble their school improvement teams, and you can see where it says start of the RIASP sessions, from identifying current performance and needs all the way over to the right. Those are the sessions that we're running with school leaders. We're running them free of cost with partners from RIASP. There's 3 different offices at RIDE that have partnered up to do this. But essentially, school leaders, and we've encouraged them to bring some of their school improvement team members. If they have someone on their school improvement team that is going to facilitate the meetings, the purpose of these sessions is for them to learn resources, protocols, and tools that they can take and bring back to their school improvement teams with the ultimate process of coming up with a school improvement plan at the end. So each of these is like a step in that process. The first being looking at your data and determining what are the needs, what do we see as far as our performance and our current needs. And then as a group, how do we prioritize, right? There's tons of data that every school has. How do we decide collectively what those priorities are? And then the next step is not necessarily sequential. One can happen before the other depending on kind of where you are. And the way we're presenting the modules, the setting SMART goals is something that will be pre-recorded that districts or school leaders or school improvement teams can watch on their own time as a group. But how do we set goals that are actionable, measurable, based on current performance data? And then the analyzing root cause is, what is causing our data to look like this? What are those reasons behind why our attendance rates are as they are, why our achievement levels are as they are? And then from that setting of SMART goals and analyzing root cause, how do we work to select evidence-based strategies, interventions, and or initiatives that will directly go back to what that root cause of the problem is? The next step is coordinating and creating the final school improvement plan. And then the last one is another step that I think is often kind of left out. A lot of times schools create plans and then they sit on a shelf or they sit on a website. And so really it's how do you not just implement those interventions but monitor to make sure that they're being done consistently with fidelity and getting the outcomes that you had hoped for. So the other piece of this, as we started to do our sessions, we've currently done the first one, and tomorrow actually we're leading the prioritizing needs session. One of the pieces of feedback we got from school leaders is that they wanted to go deeper into some of these content areas. They wanted to have a session specifically on creating a new mission and vision, working with other schools who have similar problems or similar challenges. And so we've expanded what we're able to offer all of the school leaders through a grant that RIASP has. So there's an additional opportunity that we're putting together for school leaders that will allow them to go deeper into specific content areas. The other thing that we are examining is how do we use other RIDE offices like our finance office, our talent office, and provide additional types of sessions around hiring, around retaining teachers, around creating a budget that truly is reflective of what those community needs are while still operating under your district budget. So as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of requests coming in, and we're just trying to figure out how to manage them from our own team capacity, but also recognizing that our school leaders are all over the place with their comfort and skills and readiness to do this work. So this is a lot of information here, but essentially what I want you to pull out of this is the sessions are all kind of chunked out over the next 4 to 6 months, and we have given all of the attendees the options to do a slow path after next session that is in person, so they'll be able to actually get through some of the work with their school improvement teams. Or if they want to continue the virtual route, it will be much more of us modeling how to do something that they then take back to their school improvement teams. But we've given them the choice because we realized early on that there was a lot of, as I said, differentiation needed, and people were in very different places with kind of their own readiness. Each one of the sessions is aligned to filling out a portion of their school improvement plan. So at the end of the series, if they have stuck with it and kind of done the work in between the sessions, they will have their school improvement plan created for them. It's important. You can have all the best laid intentions and ideas, but if there's no thought around how those ideas will be funded, again, it's just words on paper.